Milo, déverrouillage.
Je ne suis pas en mesure d'accéder à cette requête pour le moment.
Milo, s'il te plaît, je t'en supplie.
Je ne suis pas en mesure d'accéder à cette requête. Oxygène à 35%.
Elisabeth en tête.
Lise, on a presque plus de temps.
Pourquoi vous me faites ça? Pourquoi vous me faites ça?
Trop tard, ils sont là.
Interruption. Niveau d'oxygène approchant du seuil critique.
The woman woke up in an unknown place and realized that she was in some kind of a sealed cocoon. Since her hands were tied, it seemed impossible to escape, but the woman managed to break this strange shell that enveloped her body. Finally, she was able to free her hands. Strange memories from the laboratory began to flicker in her mind. Despite the fear of the unknown, the woman was determined to get out. Various medical devices of unknown purpose were connected to her. The woman realized that she was in a confined space that resembled a capsule. She began to knock on the walls and call for help. Suddenly the light turned on. An artificial intelligence named Milo informed her that the oxygen level was at 35%. Its purpose was to meet the medical needs of the patient. The woman does not understand what is happening and does not remember what happened. She assumed that she was in a hospital and began calling out for doctors, but no one responded except for Milo, who said that the oxygen level was at 34%. The cryogenic chamber is malfunctioning. The woman doesn't know why she's here and what her illness is. Trying to calm down, she asked Milo if anyone knows about the malfunction of her cryo chamber. Milo replied that the message was delivered, but there was no response yet. The woman tried to remember who she was, but to no avail. Milo did not mention her name, only stating that she was a patient with the code name Omicron 267. The woman continued to try to recall her past, but only saw fragmented episodes that were not connected to each other in any way. Milo announced that the oxygen level was 33% and recommended reducing air consumption to delay asphyxiation. The woman recalled some experiments that were conducted in the laboratory. After calming down, the woman asked Milo why she was here, but the artificial intelligence said that the medical report was not available until the cryogenic revival procedure was completed. The woman ordered Milo to begin the unlocking process, but he requested an authorization code. Of course, she didn't have one, so she asked Milo to call the police. A dispatcher answered the call. The woman tried to explain the situation to him, but the problem was that she did not remember who she was and how she ended up there. The dispatcher asked her to provide the manufacturer and serial number of the cryocapsule. The woman's location still could not be determined, so the dispatcher transferred her to another line. However, the call was dropped almost immediately. The woman asked Milo to conduct a DNA identification. There was one match found in the database. It turned out that the woman's name was Elizabeth Hansen. Judging by the photos, she worked in the laboratory. Suspicious sounds were heard nearby, which frightened Elizabeth. Suddenly, Police Captain Moreau called her back and asked about the current oxygen level. It turned out to be 31%, which meant that the oxygen would run out in about an hour. Captain Moreau admitted that they were unable to locate Elizabeth, and to make matters worse, the manufacturer claimed that the cryocapsule was destroyed 3 years ago. This could only mean one thing: someone deliberately wants to harm Elizabeth. She was shocked to learn that she had been missing for 3 years. Furthermore, Milo, who conducted a quick examination of the patient, reported that her health condition was normal. Elizabeth started to panic. Moreau tried to calm her down, promising that they would do everything possible to save her. According to the captain, he had already contacted the manufacturer of the capsule, Cryolite, but they refused to cooperate without a warrant. The communication was lost again, and Elizabeth was left completely alone. With helplessness, she burst into tears. Suddenly, Milo reported that the oxygen level was at 29% and the chance of survival was 0%. Milo intended to administer palliative care to the patient and give her a sedative, but Elizabeth resisted with all her might. Milo warned that any deliberate damage to the cryolite installation is a federal crime punishable by imprisonment for up to 10 years. Elizabeth was losing strength and drifting off to sleep, reminiscing about moments from her past. The oxygen level had already dropped to 23%. Elizabeth suddenly remembered a man from the laboratory. Milo interrupted her memories, saying that the oxygen level was now at 22%. Elizabeth asked Milo to find any information about herself. The artificial intelligence showed her various press mentions. Elizabeth realized that she had studied cryonics, so she likely did this to herself. Elizabeth also looked at her social media profiles and realized that she was married. More and more memories began to come back to her. Her husband's name is Leo, and they work together in the laboratory. Elizabeth asked Milo to contact Dr. Leo Ferguson, but instead of her husband, a woman answered the call. Upon hearing the request to speak with Leo, the woman hung up. The second time, she asked not to call that number again. The oxygen level dropped to 21%. Elizabeth freed her legs from some of the medical equipment and tried to figure out how to open the capsule. Seeing a white mouse, Elizabeth was frightened, not realizing that it was a hallucination. She remembered that some experiments were conducted in the laboratory. Without wasting time, Elizabeth began to search for a way out of the capsule. Milo tried again to inject her with a sedative. After damaging the equipment, Elizabeth still managed to pick up the sedative shot. The woman tried to use it to get out, but Milo electrocuted her, preventing the attempted break-in. The oxygen level was 20%. Suddenly there was an incoming call. It was Captain Moreau, who reported that they had obtained a warrant and would now be able to find out the authorization codes to open the capsule. The oxygen level is 17%. Elizabeth realized that she was beginning to lose her mind and confuse reality with fantasy. To come to her senses, she stabbed herself with a needle from the prick. Elizabeth recalled asking her husband if he was sure he wanted to do this. In the present, Moreau said the last time she was active on social media was 3 days ago. No one had reported her missing. When Moreau said that according to their information she had never been married, the woman was shocked. Also, Milo began to deny the existence of Leo Ferguson. Now Elizabeth was alone in all the pictures. Moreau assured that this illusion was only a protective reaction of her brain, so as not to completely lose her mind. Moreau began to tell Elizabeth facts from her biography, but the woman could remember nothing of the sort. She is still convinced that Leo exists and that her mother's name was Alice, though Moreau denies it. Oxygen remained at 15%. Elizabeth no longer knows what to believe, and began to suspect that Moreau was involved in all of this too. Elizabeth asked Milo to break the connection. The woman recalled how her husband had been very ill. He was taken to the hospital in a serious condition, and then what happened, Elizabeth does not know. Captain Moreau kept trying to call Elizabeth, but she ignored the calls, asking Milo to play back the last 30 seconds of the talking and turn up the volume. Some man tells Moreau that she must not find out the truth. Suddenly the same woman who had previously refused to tell Elizabeth about Leo called back and asked to hear out. According to her, Leo passed away. The woman also claimed to know the authorization codes. Elizabeth used it, though the woman begged her not to open the capsule. The unlocking process was set in motion. Elizabeth was shocked when she realized she was in weightlessness. Milo reported that she was almost 70,000 miles from Earth. Milo restored gravity. The oxygen level was 13%. The woman told Elizabeth that she had been cryogenically frozen so that she could accomplish her mission, but something went wrong. Since the woman designed this system, she knows how to operate it. Perhaps she can find a way to fix the malfunction and put Elizabeth back into cryogenic sleep. Elizabeth was only interested in one question: what was her mission? It turned out that she was to go to a planet 14 light-years from Earth to colonize it. Since Elizabeth took off recently, her ship has not yet had time to create nuclear impulse propulsion, but they don't have much time. Elizabeth remembered that she worked for the Ministry of Defense. Supposedly humanity would be extinct in 2 generations, and this was not to be made public. Captain Moreau had no choice but to lie to her and prevent her memory from recovering. It was an order from the authorities. Now Elizabeth knows for sure that Leo was real and that he is dead. There was 12% oxygen left. The woman told her that Leo had contracted a virus that had already claimed millions of lives on Earth. And that was 12 years ago. Elizabeth could not believe that she had slept for so long. Suddenly the woman said in a panic that someone was coming for her. Before the connection was lost, she managed to remind Elizabeth that she had to return to cryo-freezing at all costs before the oxygen level dropped to 2%. Otherwise, further awakening would be impossible. To find answers, Elizabeth had to retrieve her memories. The oxygen level had already dropped to the dangerous 11% mark. Elizabeth told Milo to show her all the low-priority processes. However, if Elizabeth turned off even one process, her body would not last more than 10 days after the flight. Elizabeth continued to frantically remember. When she was electrocuted again for trying to open the capsule, she remembered how Leo was in the ICU. Elizabeth held his hand in the last moments of his life. Leo whispered to her that they would meet again someday. In the present, Elizabeth asked Milo to call Alice Hansen from Paris. When she heard the woman's voice, Elizabeth immediately recognized her mother. Alice asked the daughter why she had not visited her on Sunday. Elizabeth could not hold back her tears. The oxygen level is 6%. Elizabeth made the difficult decision to eject into outer space so as not to suffer. There was 5% oxygen left. Elizabeth was preparing to meet the husband when suddenly it hit her. She asked Milo how many such capsules there were. It turned out that there were 10,000, and it all in close proximity to each other. When Milo removed the filtration, Elizabeth realized she was inside a huge ship. Some passengers had already died due to malfunctions of the cryocapsules. To prevent retina damage from prolonged exposure to ultraviolet radiation, Milo restored the screen filtration and reported that 433 capsules had malfunctioned, including Elizabeth's block. Elizabeth wanted to find Leo among the passengers, but did not know how. The oxygen level was at 4%. Remembering the numbers on the document, Elizabeth realized that it was Leo's capsule number. It turned out that he was still on board, and his block was fully operational. Milo opened Leo's cocoon and showed Elizabeth his face. The woman also noticed that her husband had no scar on his face. She did not understand how it was possible and asked Milo to find Elizabeth Hansen again in the database. Milo started a video where elderly Elizabeth Hansen talked about a unique technology for transferring memory and consciousness. Initially, it was tested on rats. The scientific community was skeptical of this development, but the technology exceeded all expectations. It turns out that Elizabeth's new body was just over 12 years old. She also realized that the woman she recently spoke to through communication was actually herself, only in old age. Elizabeth burst into hysterical laughter, realizing that she was just a clone. And even though she wasn't the real Elizabeth Hansen, she didn't want to die in this box. The oxygen level reached a critical value. In the last minutes of her life, Elizabeth recorded a voice message for Leo. She remembered that they wanted to have children, but then decided it was impractical. Now apparently they are no longer destined to meet in the new world. More than anything, Elizabeth wants to live. Oxygen level is at 3%. To prevent the woman from suffering, Milo initiated the procedure of merciful euthanasia. However, Elizabeth wasn't going to give up just like that and removed all medical tubes and drips from her body, thwarting the euthanasia. Then she ordered Milo to disable the process responsible for controlling all emergency situations in which artificial intelligence must dispose of a human being. However, Milo still cannot immerse her into hypersleep because all catheters are disconnected. Seeing white laboratory mice flooding the capsule, Elizabeth panicked, but quickly realized that it was just a hallucination. Oxygen level is at 2%. Connecting all medical tubes and a brain stimulation device to herself, Elizabeth saw that the oxygen level had dropped to 1%. This means that her chance of surviving the awakening is 0. Elizabeth was resigned to her fate, But suddenly an idea struck her. There was still oxygen left in the lost capsules. So while she would be in cryogenic sleep, Milo could bypass the security protocols and restore the oxygen level in her capsule. This would take over 14,000 hours. Milo was preparing to put Elizabeth into hypersleep, telling her about the planet they were heading to. The journey would take 34 years. Elizabeth fell asleep with a smile on her face. Her body was once again enclosed in a biogenic cocoon. In the last scenes, we see the ship breaking away from Earth under the influence of nuclear impulse thrust. Many years later, Elizabeth and Leo